Lords, I rise to support all three amendments in this grouping, but particularly Amendment 253. And I'm delighted to follow the noble Lords Jackson, Markham, and indeed Parkinson in their advocation of these amendments. I declared my interests on Monday, but this evening I have a fairly massive conflict of interest that's added itself. I don't believe I'm alone in the chamber in that I was forced not to watch Chelsea breach all the principles of equity by beating Southampton 5-1 as we sat in this chamber. The particular point and thrust of this conflict is if my football friends start telling me that my staying away from Chelsea matches is good luck for the team. So it's not without anguish that I stand before your lordships to go back to my earlier warnings about the dangers of regulators. And the dangers are stark in the clauses that we seek to amend and in the amendments themselves. The questions that your noble lords have raised this evening in this section boil down to what's it going to cost overall? If you're a club, you're looking at this thing and saying, what's it going to cost overall? Then the club's going to say, well, what's it going to cost me? And then, of course, the third question will come to their mind, apart from those luckless clubs in the Premier League, what am I going to get? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But if we go back to the first of them, what will it cost overall? We've heard over and again that we just have no idea. There's estimates which are clearly wet. Yes.
I've met plenty of clubs who've given an estimate of what they've been told the likely cost will be. Plenty of clubs, including across the Premier League. So there's no ambiguity of the kind of sum of money that many Premier League clubs are citing as what they expect the cost to be.
I thank the noble Lord Mann for that intervention, but the fact remains that they cannot know what it's going to cost because, for a start, we don't have any certainty as to what clubs are going to be in the scheme. We've been told what it might start at, but there has been the noble minister, the Baroness, noble Baroness Twycross has said she will not.
There has been extraordinary levels of dialogue between the Premier League and government over a long period of time on this. The idea that the Premier League doesn't have some idea of the likely potential cost and hasn't spoken to clubs in relation to it is simply nonsense. I've spoken to clubs where they've given specific estimates of what they anticipate it will be. Now, whether that's accurate or not, the idea that those figures aren't there and haven't been discussed at length is something of a fantasy.
Sorry to intervene on the intervention, but I haven't seen you at any Premier League meetings. I've been to them all. And I can assure you we have never had a discussion about the potential costs because we've never known what the potential costs are because nobody has told those to us. We've looked at the impact assessment and that's given us a vague estimation, but to suggest that we've had a long, detailed discussion, debate, understanding, and we know what the costs are is not correct.
I thank the noble Baroness Brady, and indeed the noble Lord Mann for his intervention. And he seemed to think that I was talking about Premier League clubs. I wasn't. What I was saying was that the noble minister, the noble Baroness Twycross, had said she did not want on the front of the bill what clubs were going to be regulated. So if a club doesn't know whether it's going to be regulated or not, it certainly doesn't know how much it's going to cost them. Point one. Well, the noble Lord might shake his head, but I think that's a fairly obvious point. We don't know who is going to pay. We don't know, but we don't know what it's going to cost. The noble Lord Hayward, I believe it was talking about an estimate of 10 million, which was. Oh, I beg your pardon. It's the noble Lord Markham. We're talking about.
My noble friend Baroness Brady referred to 10 million. I was quoting from the impact assessment of 140 million over 10 years as the midpoint which the government is operating to.
Thank you. I beg the Baroness's pardon at not attributing the 10 million point to her, but the fact is we know that that is ludicrous, because if we heard about the cost of other regulators, it's way more than that. It's way more than that. So, if I could make some headway here, what would it cost overall? We don't know what the overall cost will be, and we don't know what it's going to cost the individual clubs. To talk a little bit more about that, imagine that you are a local entrepreneur. There's a club in a little bit of trouble. They come to you and they say, you've always wanted to own a football club. Why don't you take over our club? And then you can have one of those back-to-back league promotion successes that you've dreamed about, and you'll be famous in your community. And you say, well, I got a few bob. I don't know how much, but yeah, okay, I'll consider it. And it's one of those clubs that one of the noble lords talked about on Monday, that I think they were talking about. It was on the opposite side of the house. They were saying, well, they might have a turnover of £2 million and 7 employees, I think was the number quoted. And you're being invited to take over this club and bung some of your money. And you may not have a lot. You may think you have enough. But then you say, well, what's going to happen? Well, my concern is that when you're told there's going to be a regulator who's going to be telling you this and that, and who can tell you who to have on your board and all of that, you'll say, well, forget about that. As an entrepreneur, I don't play that particular game. But say you swallow that, then you say, well, this regulator, how much is it going to cost me? Dunno, mate. Well, what could it be? Dunno. And so you turn your back and you go off and maybe sponsor the local cricket club or something like that. It doesn't work if you're not absolutely clear about what the cost is going to be.
Sorry, Matt.
Yes.
May I just, and I asked the noble lord this, given I know his experience in terms of consulting and a lot of entrepreneurial and start-up situations, and it just makes me wonder. And again, I know he's done lots of these type of moves. When you're investing in a business as a start-up or a club, clearly you'll have business plans. There might be good business plans, there might be bad business plans, but it's normally based around an investment and an expansion. I'm just wondering in this case, as I think about it, given that the regulator can then say no to those business plans and that investment once they get into it and do it,
Yes.
then suddenly your investment proposition, I assume, would be up a creek.
Yes.
So I would like to hear the noble lords. What will that do to the investment proposition?
Well, the noble Lord Markham makes a very good point that if some local worthies approach you and they say, will you invest in this club, and you say, well, I've got to figure out what it's going to cost me, and they say, well, yeah, you've also got to figure out whether your plan's going to be acceptable to the regulator. Again, you turn your back. Entrepreneurialism is the heartbeat of the economy, as several noble lords have said in this debate over the past few days. What this regulator proposal does is just turn the entrepreneurs away from wanting to invest in it.